yet, I'm Heather, and this is Recently Seen Reading. I've got a shortish, I hope, but probably not, knowing how these things go, update about my reading over the last week or so. I've finished the 3 that were in progress last week and started 3 more. Since it's blazing hot and the sun is scorching the room I usually film in, I've decided to film in the living room. The downside of this is more traffic noise and quite likely more sirens, because the main drag is just outside my window. Nevertheless, we'll just carry on. I have finished Mariam Kaba's We Do This Until We Free Us, which was published this year by Haymarket Press. It's a collection of short essays, mostly republished from interviews, podcasts, blog posts, online magazines, that kind of thing, with a couple of new and original pieces included. Kaba is very much focused on the nature of prison abolition work in the United States, and it's a very clear, easy to understand series of arguments about the nature of abolition work and its purpose. Last week I mentioned that there was a third idea that I found quite striking, but I forgot to mention it, of course. So this week we're going to slide it in. Kaba talks about the problem of spectacle and empathy. She's drawing on Saidiya Hartman's work in Scenes of Subjection, which is a very academic work. But Kaba makes it clear how the reliance on spectacle to turn up the volume on people's attention and empathy and concern around the horrific things that happen around police violence and sexual violence in particular, how this is not a great strategy. It relies on rapid outbursts of heightened empathy, which very quickly disappear, and the attention is drained away after the spectacle dries up, which I think a lot of us have experienced with the contrast between what happened last summer and what's happening this summer. So a useful and interesting point. Kaba really calls us to stay engaged and pay attention to the very ordinariness of police violence and sexual violence, and to think about what it means to be working in community and in relationship to other people, to think about how we can address harm without getting caught up in the legal system. That she calls us, I think, to imagine a different way of being and a different way of repairing harm, the kind of harms that come from racial violence and sexual violence in particular. If you're looking for a collection of shortish pieces that articulate some of the ideas that you'd find in Michelle Alexander or Angela Davis's work, you'll probably enjoy the Kaba. So I finished that one. The next one that I finished up was Tove Jansson's The Sculptor's Daughter, which was published in 1968, and translated by Kingsley Hart. This one's translated from the Swedish and is a memoir of Jansson's childhood. The character in the book is probably no more than 7 years old, maybe at the most. And it's a series of vignettes set largely in Helsinki, or in an island off of Helsinki. And in the end, I found this a slightly frustrating book to read, largely because of the vignette structure that she uses. She is refusing a coherent narrative. It's very much almost like panel by panel, the way she would maybe do it in her cartoons. But I found that ultimately frustrating. There's also a turn at the end of the memoir that's interesting and a little off-putting at the same time. The last quarter, I'd say, of the memoir, Jansson, as a child, is talking more about her relationship, I think, with her father, and it's very clear that as a child she idolized her father. But the thing that the child, Jansson, articulates is often misogyny. hostility towards primarily the female guests who distract her father and distract her mother and take the attention away from the child. And on the one hand, yes, this is the limited view of a child, but on the other hand, it's also clear that the child is articulating some of her father's hostility towards women, sometimes mostly older women. So a bit disappointing in that. If you like memoir, and you like memoir that doesn't rely on a standard kind of life path, a narrative arc, you might like Janssen's memoir. The other book I finished this week was Magda Szasbo's Isa's Ballad, which was published in 1963 and portrays the events from about I'd probably say 1950, 1957, something like that. So its original publication date is much more contemporaneous with the events that are described. So Isa's Ballad is the story of Isa, a woman in her probably early 30s, who's a doctor living in Budapest, and her mother, Etty, who is 75 and has just been widowed. Her husband of 50 years has just died, and Isa has moved her from the small, quite rural town into her apartment in Budapest. And it's the kind of topic that could be treated comically. Etty's confusion around modern appliances, a new tram system, a new city, could have been played for comedy. But Szasbo was more interested in looking at how sad so much of this is, how the mother and daughter just don't understand each other at all, and are unable to articulate that they both fundamentally care about each other. And over the course of the novel, Isa becomes more and more rigid, I think, and Etty becomes more and more wispy and essentially disappears. It's quite a sad novel, but it's sticking with me. I think one of the things that really struck me as someone who's the child of people brought up in the Depression is Etty's attention to worn out things, how much she values the things that she mends, the things that she makes do with, the things that are slightly damaged but are being saved anyway and being used. There's very much kind of a Depression, poverty point of view. And Isa, her daughter, is very much invested in modernity, new surfaces, shiny surfaces, and has no attachment to the old things that people make do with. So it's an interesting kind of contrast. It has a couple of other characters that are introduced to provide contrast to Isa and Etty, and their points of view help explain both Etty's position and Isa's limitations and where they come from and what they might mean. If you are interested in realistic European novels, novels that are invested in a certain kind of realism, that are not plot driven so much but are very much character explorations, you might enjoy Isa's Ballad. But don't go looking to it for a comic reading of what it's like to go through the end stages of life. It's not that kind of a book. So those are the three that I finished. Now, what have I started or am I about to start? Another one for Women in Translation Month. I picked up Annie Bair's 1998 Am I Disturbing You? This was translated by Sheila Feischman. If you've read any Canadian novels written in French and translated in English, you've probably read some of Feischman's translations. So this novel, it's very short. It's a novella, really. It's less than 100 pages, so it'll be a pretty quick read, I think. It was nominated for a Giller in '99, so the translation was nominated. And it seems to be the story of a young woman named Delphine who arrives and is living in Paris. And in the opening 2 or 3 pages of the novella, she dies. And I think the rest of the novella is going to be a story of how she ended up in Paris, how she ends up involved with people she's involved with, and how she ends up dying in this apartment in Paris. So I'm looking forward to reading that. One, it's been a long time since I read any Hébert or any Québécois literature. I think the last Hébert I read would have been Kamouraska years and years ago when I would have read it in French for a French class at some point. I also picked up, when I went to the library last week, at random essentially, Helen Thurston's 2002 Glass Devil. So this is a Swedish police procedural. And I've read, maybe 20 or 30 pages of it. This one's translated by Katarina Tucker. 50 pages in, it seems like a fairly standard Scandi noir police procedural type novel. There's some warning signs in it that the plot's going to go into some probably very red herring-ish directions, because a satanic cult plot point has been brought up, and I'm always both very skeptical about and very suspicious of mystery novels in particular, any novel that rely on satanic panic as a plot premise. But we shall see. That's kind of my distraction reading for the week. The other one I'm looking forward to a great deal is one of my holds that came in earlier than I expected. That's Becky Chambers' latest novella, essentially her 2021 A Psalm for the Wild Build. I'm very much looking forward to this. I like Chambers' work. I like the sci-fi aspects of it, but it's optimism. I like her optimism. Her stories seem to be not doom and gloom. The conflict generally seems to resolve into situations where people live full and mostly happy lives. Not always, but mostly. So I'm looking forward to that. It's quite short. I'm looking forward to that as kind of mental relief from Isa's Ballad, which is neither short nor happy in many, many ways. So that's what I've finished up this week. 3. That's what I've got on the go. Another 3. If you've read any of these or have suggestions of books that are like them or different from them that you think I might enjoy, let me know. Other than that, I hope you have a good week and that you find books to read that both make your brain work and make you happy. Bye-bye.